and Seb coming up a little bit later on in today's Lock on Sunday. But first of all, it's a very warm welcome to Harry Bentley, fresh off a winner yesterday at Haydock. So you must be feeling rather chipper today, Harry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Things are going good. Had another winner yesterday, which I was pleased with, obviously. Yeah,
26 winners for the season so far. How does that compare with previous years?
So at this stage of the career, I'm definitely up on winners and rides at this stage of the season. So obviously going into Royal Ascot, it's nice to be on a bit of a roll, and yeah, my confidence is high.
Yeah, might just mention, as we can start with a winning note, the winner yesterday, Cold Stare, the first time tongue tie in what looked to be pretty horrible conditions yesterday at Haydock. How bad was it?
More than anything, it was, I mean, it was obviously very soft ground, but it was fresh rain into the ground and it wasn't sort of holding or tacky, so they were going through it. But this horse just relishes soft ground, and I think that was the difference between winning and losing.
And a good spell for you, apart from obviously the 26 winners this season, but I think you've had 4 winners this week, 8 over the last 2 weeks. Is that something that you keep an eye on, the number of winners you have, or is it what all professionals say, I just go out and ride the next race?
It's an element of that. I mean, obviously, you've just got to get your head down and ride whatever you've got, but you can't help but sort of look at your stats and see how things are going, and obviously I'm aware that things are going pretty good, so I keep an eye on it. I don't get too bogged down in the figures, but no, when things are going nicely, you can't help but sort of see how it's going.
So what would be the elements you think that are making 2019 a good start to the season so far in comparison to previous years?
Well, I think more than anything, I've got a big stable behind me with Rafe Beckett's yard, and any jockey needs that sort of support from a big yard. And you know, the horses are in good form, and not only Rafe Beckett, but I've got some other trainers behind me giving me those rides and winners. So just yeah, that income of rides is probably proving to be the difference.
You've been around for a long time, even though you're still obviously relatively young, and you've got young looks as well, which clearly help. But you've done a lot in the sport already. Of course, years ago you were a retained rider by Qatar Racing. So what was it like to get that sort of responsibility so early on in your career?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I mean, I can't quite believe it myself, but this is my 10th year riding, and I'm not sure where the time's gone, but yeah, I got that position when I was quite young with Qatar Racing, which was obviously an incredible position to have got at such a young age, and it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, it was really good, and I got some great experience from it. I rode in some very big races. I was pacemaking in some big races, and it was good times. I really enjoyed my time there, and at that stage of my career, I was put onto a stage which I wouldn't have been on otherwise.
Just give us an idea, before we get a little bit deeper into that, about your progression into the sport and your background. Obviously, without wanting to sound in any way stereotyping anybody, but you are very eloquent. You speak very well, which I think would be one of the things that would help you get on with a lot of people in racing. Well,
I think racing, I suppose the sport sort of evolved in a way where your feedback and talking to owners and trainers is also a massive part of the whole thing. Yes, your riding has to be good and you have to perform on the horses, but it's also very important to come back, and when you get off those horses you might have a big syndicate to talk to, and they all want to know what your opinion is of the race you've just ridden and the horse and where it can go next. So I think once you're off the horse, that's also a massive part of our jobs now. And I think, well, I feel as though I kind of deal with that quite well, and I suppose I enjoy that side of things as well.
So for people at home who aren't entirely aware, how did you get into race riding?
Well, just through my family, really. I mean, I've been riding horses, and I had ponies from whenever I can remember. Myself and my brother did a lot of hunting and pony club, and we sort of got a lot of support from our parents, and we were sort of more into the national hunt side of things, but me being so small allowed me to sort of be able to go on the flat, and my weight's always stayed very good, so that was sort of the path I wanted to take, and my father was very sort of positive of me going down the flat jockey route.
And who were the influences from trainers and jockeys that perhaps you looked up to who would have helped you along the way?
I mean, when I was younger, I mean, Frankie Dettori was the person that I used to watch and took a lot of pleasure in sort of seeing riding winners and what have you. So I think when I was sort of 17, 18, when I was riding in races with him, it was sort of it was quite a big sort of point to get to. It was fantastic, and I suppose I was living 20 minutes down the road with my parents when I was sort of 17, and used to go to Gary Moore's when I was young, and it seemed to work very well going in there every morning. And then during the summer holiday, Gary sort of said to me, if you get your license, and I'd give you a few rides. So it progressed from there, and like I say, I was very, very lucky. I got a lot of support from my mother and father.
Well, obviously parents, huge help. But what was Gary like in those early days? Is he? You may see him on the racecourse. He's always quite calm and relaxed and very level-headed about things. Is he the same person in the yard? Yeah,
he is. I mean, everybody knows that he works incredibly hard at home, and so do all of sort of Josh and Jamie and Hayley. And it was a great place for me to be, because I sort of went in, hadn't worked in any other yards, and it was hard work, and there was plenty to do, and I got a very good grounding there, and I think it set me off on a really good point. And the fact that I didn't have to sort of move up to Newmarket from a young age, 16, 17, I stayed at home, and it was only 20 minutes down the road, so that also made a difference. But it was, as I say, it was a really good place to start, and I felt gave me a good grounding.
Bump into Ryan much there?
Not much, no. I think I saw him come in one morning, which was great, but yeah, I don't think I saw him any more times than that.
You obviously, we touched already on the Qatar racing, the position there. What were the main challenges for you when you got that job? Bearing in mind that obviously Qatar racing was a burgeoning force within the sport at the time, and a lot of people were slightly taken aback that they'd attached themselves to such a young rider with the lack of experience that you had at the time.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, it was a massive boost for me to get a position like that. And I was actually at the end of my £3 claim when they sort of took me on, and that, as any rider, is an incredibly important stage of your career. When you're getting to the end of your claim, you sort of need to make an impression, otherwise you can sort of fall by the wayside a little bit. So it was very good to get me into the limelight a bit more. As a young rider, obviously there are pressures that go with that, and I think at times I sort of, well, looking back now, that I didn't think this at the time, as you never do when you're young, but looking back now, I was quite young to be in that position, and perhaps my riding wasn't quite good enough at that stage, but then again I learnt from that. As I say, at the time you never really think that, and you only sort of the benefit of hindsight, but there was pressures that go with it, but I felt like I learnt a lot from that whole process.
Yeah, if you were to speak to yourself with the 2019 Harry Bentley was to speak to the one who got the job at Qatar all those years ago, what would you be saying to yourself?
Probably more than anything, I suppose, just sort of take it as it comes. And I think when as you say, they were an outfit that had sort of burst onto the scene and were putting an awful lot into the sport, as obviously they still are, but it was new then, and I think I was in a bit of a panic to sort of prove myself a bit and everything, but you're best just to, do what you do on a daily basis. Don't try and do anything different. And I'd probably just tell myself just to relax a bit, I suppose. And I mean, my riding's come on an awful lot since I was sort of 19, riding in those days. So it's easy to think now, I wish I'd done this, wish I'd done that. But as I say, I think I learned from the process, and sort of probably made me into the jockey I am now. When did you first start forming a working relationship with Henry Candy? It was actually through Qatar Racing, because we had, I could be wrong here, but I think a horse called Valonia used to be with Mr. Candy, and because we had a couple of horses there, I used to go in and ride out every now and again. And when the sort of partnership sort of broke down with myself and Qatar Racing, when I moved forward, which I must say it was certainly a good thing for both of us. They felt it was time to move on with their jockeys, and it was certainly a right thing for me too as well. So at the end of that, I had to kind of keep contacts and think, right, who am I going to go into now? Which trainers can I focus on, and that have supported me. So I used to really enjoy going into Mr. Candy's, and I felt like I struck up a good relationship there. So I thought I'll keep going in there. And I was living in Newbury at the time, so it was location-wise, it was an easy place to go into. And ever since then, I've been sort of riding for Mr. Candy and going in there every now and again. What was it that you enjoyed going into Henry Candy's about? Well, I think it's just a very laid-back atmosphere. He's got his own grass gallops, which are fantastic. and everything's very relaxed, and there's a routine to everything. And also, Mr. Candy's a fantastic person to ride for. He doesn't tie you down to instructions, and sort of listen to your feedback. And as I say, I've enjoyed going in there and riding for him over the years.
Yeah, and of course, as good as any rider is, they can't ride without the raw material. And you got on board LaMotte O, which I imagine when you were confirmed as his regular rider, that must have been a huge boost for the confidence as much as anything else.
It was. It completely came out of the blue for me. I spoke to, well, Mr. Jacobs had sort of said to me before a ride at Chelmsford, I was riding one of his for Simon Dow at the time, and he just asked me for a chat before I weighed out, and sort of mentioned it to me then. I sort of, as I mentioned, completely came out of the blue. So it was towards the end of the season, and I was away for the winter as I have been in Dubai, and just knowing that was going to come back and that was going to be the plan to go straight for the Lock-Inch, and it was a big boost. Sort of any jockey needs a good ride like that, and it was a fantastic sort of call up to get.
How would you describe LaMotte O as a racehorse?
Well, I mean, he's been, as I say, fantastic for me. He's a very sort of boisterous character at home and on the racetrack as well. And yeah, I mean, he's been a great horse for me, and he continues to be.
Which performance that you've been aboard for is the stand-up performance for you aboard LaMotte O?
I mean, it would have to be the July Cup, as we just seen there. It's, you know, going into it, it was back down to 6 furlongs, and he just came into everything sort of felt right, and it was just one of those days which I'll sort of never forget. When
you're in a Group 1 race, you see it so often when a jockey travels in a Group 1 race, and they must have that feeling. I would love to know what it's like to actually feel it, because you can see it. Travelling well, knowing, or almost 99% sure that you've got everything covered. What's that like? Well,
I mean, even with a Group 1 race, you just got to ride it like any other race, and the fundamentals are exactly the same. You're on a horse, and
good level-headed attitude. Very good.
Yeah, you're up against sort of 20 or so opposition in that race, and I think more than anything, I should just went out and rode it like a normal race. But then again, yes, you do get that feeling at sort of a certain point. You think I'm travelling pretty well here. You know, you sort of have a little look to your left and right, and you see how everyone else is going. And I knew that when I went for him, I had enough underneath me, and when they do pick up, yeah, it's a fantastic feeling.
And a horse like LaMotte O, who's at times he's been criticised. Some people have not been that kind to him. Well, obviously, he's very well appreciated by a lot of people because, you know, at 2, 3, 4, etc. He's the type of horse that I imagine a jockey like you would take very close to your heart as much as anything else. Despite, you know, obviously a good horse you'd have an appreciation for, but just the way he has performed for such a long period of time.
That's it. I mean, he's been around for quite a long time now. He had a very good 2-year-old campaign, but I didn't ride him as a 2-year-old, and then I sort of got on in his 3-year-old years, and yeah, he's a serious longevity. He's been at the top of his game for a long time now, and you know, people do knock him at times, and he's been tried at sort of a mile, and obviously he's run over 6 and 7 furlongs, but you can't knock what he's done. He's been an incredible performer for a long time, and he won the Group 2, the Challenge Stakes at Newmarket at the end of last season, and in great spirits, and he went into Champions Day into the sprint and in very good form, but the ground just went against him that day. He just can't seem to go on soft ground. But I think that's another thing. He is a fast ground horse, and if he doesn't get those conditions, then he's just not on his A game.
Where is he at now? What would be the plan for him, LaMotte?
You'd have to ask Mr. Candy and Paul Jacobs as to what they'll do next.
Right, okay. You've obviously formed an excellent relationship this season, of course, in particular, with Rafe Beckett, which you touched on, saying that you've got that stable behind you. How did that all come about, and you know, what's it like, that experience of riding for Rafe Beckett? Well,
how did it come about? I suppose it's another example of with Qatar Racing again. I suppose the first time I ever rode for Rafe was with Qatar Racing. Well, it was probably Pearl Bloodstock at the time, when they had a few horses with him. And so I used to go in every now and again, sit on the horses, report back to Sheikh Fahad and David Revers.
So a few of the early horses were Pearl.
That's it, the yellow with the blue stars. Yeah. And so that's probably initially how I sort of got into the yard and rode a bit for Rafe. And then just over the years, got a few rides for him and sort of built on that. And then for the last couple of seasons, I've ridden quite a few for him. Last year, I ended up some sort of beginning of the season riding predominantly for him, and then I've come into this season sort of riding as first jockey.
Yeah, and what's that responsibility like, riding as first jockey for Rafe Beckett?
Well, it's great, as I touched on earlier. Getting the pick and share of a big yard is incredibly helpful for any jockey. I mean, we've got a lot of horses in the yard and a lot of nicely bred and good bred horses. So there's a constant income of rides for me, and on some nice horses. And I mean, it's great. That's just what you need.
Lots of nice fillies, all with the ending of the name de Vega. And of course, a horse that finished second at Chester behind Medea Manuela de Vega, then ran at Epsom. How good a performance was this, and how good at Oaks was it?
Well, I think it was a very good performance from her. I think I got good position during the race from stall 1, which is never a great place to be over a mile and a half. That definitely didn't help, that bump. And I sort of thought immediately after the race, perhaps I should have been third if I hadn't got that bump. But actually, the third horse has flown home and I think put in the quickest sectional time for the last furlong. So I can't really say I'm unlucky to finish fourth in the end. But she's run a great race, as I mentioned, got good position during the race, got a bump in the straight, but she's run a hell of a race and an exciting filly to go to war with.
Would she have been at any way disadvantaged by Epsom, the way she raced?
I don't think so. She was very relaxed during the whole race, and it's important that they don't use too much sort of energy pulling up the hill, because you're climbing for an awful long time. Yeah. She was very relaxed during the race, so she's not used any unnecessary energy in that respect, and she's a very, very straightforward and very well balanced filly, and I think she actually suited the track pretty well.
And ground for her, because obviously I think she won at Ponty at the end of. I mean, what would be her ideal condition? She's
quite versatile. I mean, she won first time out on good to soft. She won at Pontefract on good to firm. I think if there's good in the description, I think she's happy. She's quite versatile filly, and as I say, she's very well balanced and a good mover. So I don't think she's too fussy.
I think one of the most exciting horses you've ridden this season, visually anyway, came at Goodwood recently. Aloe Vera. She produced quite a stunning performance from a horse of such experience. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a fantastic run. She'd only had the one run going into the race, winning at Chepstow, and it looked like they went very fast that day, and she finished with a really strong run. But coming into this listed race, she was obviously one of the least experienced horses in the race, and she did everything right. She came there. Had to wait for a little bit of a gap, but when I went for her, she quickened really nicely and put a bit of distance between herself and a pretty good field.
Any idea of what could be the plan for her?
I'm not sure at the moment what her plans are. I mean, again, that'll have to be up to Mrs. Rousing and Rafe.
Yeah, and Rafe Beckett, again, you look at characters and how he seems. He's been on Luck on Sunday. He's got strong opinions, but he also seems fairly level-headed when he's at the races. He seems in control of his emotions and what's going on. Is he like that when things go right or wrong? Yeah,
I mean, obviously myself and Rafe, we have to work together, as do any jockey and trainer. I'm riding for him almost on a daily basis, and there has to be sort of a good understanding of each other, and obviously he knows now exactly how I ride, and I know how he wants the horses to be ridden. With anything, there are always going to be times where things don't go to plan. I've done the wrong thing, I put the horse in the wrong place. That happens. It's just part of it. But we have a good working relationship, and as I say, I know how he wants the horses ridden now, so it's going well.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the fact that you've had, you say, a decade in the sport and already been through an enormous amount, and you've emerged through that 10-year period, nice and level-headed. When you think about young riders, and we've seen a lot written about a lot of riders struggling with issues in the weighing room and associated issues in the weighing room, on the racecourse, etc. How difficult is it nowadays for young riders to come in and make a success of being a jockey?
I think there are a lot of pressures and strains on jockeys which people might not see from the outside. I mean, as we've mentioned previously already, that I've sort of had jobs and they've gone by, and I've had rides that I've also lost, and there are lots of highs and lows in the sport. I know in any sport that is the case as well, but I suppose it's just sort of a matter of resilience, sort of how you can take those setbacks and move forward, and hopefully not take things too personally, because at the end of the day it is a business, and any decision made by trainers or owners is almost a business decision. So you can't take these things too personally, but at the same time you've got to, if something hasn't gone right and you've lost it for a certain reason, you have to realise what's gone wrong or what might be the breakdown, whether it be your fault or not, and sort of just overcome that and move forward. And I think it's just a matter of being quite level-headed. If you have a sort of a personality, you sort of have extreme highs and extreme lows, then I suppose the sport will really get to you. But I think if you can keep as level-headed as possible, I think it can only help.
It's a massive challenge for anybody trying to make it in any particular industry that they want to succeed in. But in the sport of horse racing, and in particular for jockeys, in order to bounce back from knockbacks, etc., how much do you rely on yourself, inner strength, mental strength, however you wish to describe it? How do you balance that against the support that you need around you from people?
Yeah, you need people around you. I'm lucky that my mother and father are very sort of supportive of me, and they're sort of very involved with what I'm doing. So I can always, if there are certain things, I can always sort of bounce off them and what's going on, and I think that is quite important. So yeah, I think your sort of inner circle plays a massive part in that.
And what about your own ability to deal with that? You sort of mentioned it already, but for young riders coming through now, how strong do they have to be to cope with the challenges? And say a lot of it is a lot of lows as well as the occasional highs.
That's right, and at the end of the day, it's an individual sport. We haven't got, like football or rugby or cricket, you've got a team around you, and if things go badly and there's sort of a bad performance and you lose a match or what have you, you've got each other to sort of bounce off, and a big sort of network of people and coaches telling you, what you could have done or whatever, and moving forward. But with this sport, it's an individual game, and we are out for ourselves, and you have to be the one driving home at the end of a bad day on your own and sort of going through it with yourself and what have you. So I think you've got to reflect on things in a way that, accept what's gone wrong and what have you, and find a way to move forward, whether that be, you need to know what you've done wrong and hopefully not let that happen again, or if it's something that's completely out of your hands, then just sort of accept that is the case. And I'm saying this, at times I sort of in that position where I can be on the way home and I think I should have won a race or what have you, and it is hard. It's not easy to deal with, but it is all part of it, and you've just got to sort of ride the wave.
Well, you've certainly ridden the wave pretty well. Just very briefly before we wrap this segment up, just looking ahead at Ascot, I know obviously the full book of rides is nowhere near complete yet, but I think you are riding one for David Evans, Good Vibes, a youngster who's shown quite a lot of promise so far. How good is she?
Well, I think she's very good. She the first time I sat on her was at Salisbury, and she did things sort of a little bit back to front. She was a bit keen early on, and then in the latter part of the race she was hanging left-handed across the track, and she sort of gave a bit of ground away, but she still won. And then going into York, she was a lot more straightforward, and she raced sort of completely straight that day, which helped. And off a strong pace, she finished really, really strong. And I mean, I liked the way she did things. So she's going into Ascot, I think, with a good chance. And
to be fair to David, he's always said positive things about her from a very early stage. And he's not somebody who says his geese are swan, are they? He's pretty honest with his assessment of his horses.
Yeah, that's right. David's very straight down the line, and I think he's made no secret that he really likes his horse. And I think he was quite disappointed when she got beaten first time out, but she really built on that first effort, and has done, as I say, nothing wrong in her last two starts, so she's got to have a live chance.
Well, she's an exciting horse. Harry, thank you very much for joining us. It's been interesting chatting with you, and you're going to stay for a little bit, aren't you, before you head off to the races?
I'm not going anywhere yet.
Thank you very much. Harry Bentley, it's been fascinating listening to his experiences over the past decade. You can't believe it. He looks